I'm technically 1 degree away from knowing how Bruce Lee actually died. Except everybody involved denies it happened. It would be very strange for 2 dudes to be like, we're going to go travel the world together. I am never going to tell you what to do with your face. All right, here we go. I'm going to pretend I'm pushing record because that feels right. Okay, I'm pressing record. Boop. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Howard. I go by L2. Yes, you can call me L2. Everybody does. It's a long story. It's actually not that long a story, but we'll save it for another time. Welcome to Different, Not Broken, which is our podcast on exactly that there are a lot of people in this world walking around feeling broken, and the reality is you're just different, and that's fine. After my dad was in Vietnam, I think he was in Vietnam 66 to 67, he came home, he did another year in the Navy stateside, and then he was discharged, I guess, honorably. He has his DD-214. Anyway, had. He doesn't need it now. Benefits don't do much for him now. But he had his DD-214. His benefits do help my mom, though, so there's that. Anyway. So after he got back from Vietnam, he had a friend that he met. I'm almost positive he met when he was in residency in Washington State. He loved living in Seattle, and because Seattle's gloomy and gray all the time, and that was like his baseline state of happiness. He used to go outside when it was overcast and take what he called gloom baths, and that was to just like sit in the gross weather that everybody else is like, this is terrible. So he loved it, but we are also all very prone to seasonal depression. So in a very typical Jewish manner, he loved where he lived, and it made him miserable. So on brand. He was there for 2 years, and then he got a job at University of Florida, what was Student Health at the time, which is now Shands Hospital. It was so long ago that it was before Shands Hospital existed. And he ended up being the team doctor for a game while Spurrier was quarterback. He was not an orthopod, so he spent the entire game going, don't get hurt, don't get hurt, don't get hurt. I will be useless to you, don't get hurt. But he was the team doctor while Spurrier was quarterback, which is pretty cool. He came back from Vietnam, settled back in Philadelphia, was there for a while, and he had a friend who was a pathologist, and they were friends like their whole lives. And they both were single, so they could kind of travel the world together. And they did. And they were in Hong Kong in 1973. And just like, I want to say, they usually like went somewhere for a conference. So if they were traveling, they would travel a continent, but they would do it as they would use the conference as an excuse to get there, and also probably got some of the travel covered. And so they were in Hong Kong, and they must have been there for a conference because somebody that his best friend Pat knew came up to him to talk about pathologist things. For those who do or do not know, pathologists, usually they can look at like biopsies to tell you if there's disease there, so they can do that. But they also tend to be the people who do autopsies, is what I was trying to say. That's the word that I was trying to get to. My word finding skills are just like A+ lately. But so they do autopsies. And so my dad went with Pat once to a meeting of, I don't know, it was like a party of a bunch of pathologists. And he said they spent the whole time looking at slides of dead people. And he was like, this is not my jam. This is not my vibe. I'm not going to any more parties with Pat. But anyway, they did travel a lot together. And they were sitting at dinner at a restaurant in Hong Kong. And this pathologist that Pat knew came up to him and said, hey,
can you come with me for a minute?
And so he did. And then he came back and he sat down. And my dad said, what was that about? And Pat says, oh, Bruce Lee died. We were talking about the autopsy. I guess my dad just didn't really think to ask anything else. And he was like, oh, is it interesting? And he was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's some things there that, they've got to figure out. They might want me to look at the slides. I'm not sure yet. And he goes, oh, okay. And they went about their evening. My dad, and obviously my dad has not brought this up with him in the last, let's say, 9 years at a minimum. But before that, my dad brought it up with him a few times. And every time he swore it didn't happen. He denied that it happened. And anytime my dad said, do you remember when we were in Hong Kong? He'd be like, no, I don't remember that happening. No, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? That didn't happen. And he's like, no, we were sitting in the restaurant. You said, and then I said, and that guy came over, and it was a pathologist out of blah, 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 blah place. And you walked away with him, and then you came back, and you told me Bruce Lee died. He's like, that didn't happen. He's like, I was there. I remember it happening. He's like, no, it didn't happen. So there was a period of time there where I'm going to guess that the pathologists of the world did not know that they were not supposed to be talking about this. And somebody threatened somebody because it became like this international thing where everybody was talking about it and there was all this suspicion around his death and nobody knew what happened. And my dad, being my dad, was like, oh, well, Pat knows. Why doesn't everybody just ask Pat? And so he asked Pat, and Pat was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That never happened. So had my dad asked a couple more questions on one fateful night in 1973, he could have actually known, and nobody would have known to threaten him. I'm technically 1 degree away from knowing how Bruce Lee actually died. Except everybody involved denies it happened. Some of them, who are not Bruce Lee, are dead now. So that's complicated. Yeah, just sitting in a random restaurant in Hong Kong, which is a thing that apparently single men did in 1973. Very weird. Now that would be very strange. I think it would be very strange for two dudes to be like, we're going to go travel the world together. And I have confirmation that my dad was straight. I do not have confirmation that Pat was straight. Somebody said that to my dad, because Pat was always a bachelor. Always. And people thought my dad was always going to be a bachelor too, so they probably just assumed there was something going on there. There wasn't. Not that that would have been a problem. I just wouldn't have been born. But my dad had incredible gaydar. He had the most finely tuned gaydar, unless it was obnoxiously obvious. But he would get patients occasionally that there's a very specific type of mental health patient who comes in and very clearly is miserable because they have a secret that they don't want to share, or they think it makes them that there's something wrong with them. And then when they finally do share it and the boring old white guy across the desk has no reaction to it, they're like, oh, so this isn't going to end my life? And they're like, no, this is not a big deal at all. You're totally fine. And then they never come back. It usually with men was that they thought they were gay and they were struggling with it. And he could spot that a mile away. He would get it before anybody I've ever seen. But somebody could come in, a man could come in, holding hands with another man wearing a pride shirt. And he'd be like, how's your wife? But anyway, I say that because I was probably an early teenager when somebody asked him if there was a possibility that Pat could be gay. And of course, at first he was like, no, Pat dates women. I think he's just a bachelor. And then you could see it's slowly percolating through as he's like, no. What? There was this one. And then all of a sudden, everything clicked and he's like, oh, yeah, that probably makes sense. Yeah. And it wasn't like it was a problem. It was just how has it been 50 years and I'm just clocking this now? Awesome. If it's right in front of him, nothing. But if it's buried under 8 different layers of pathology, right to it. And now we'll go to Allison, who has this week's small talk.
So we've got a question here. I find myself looking at people sideways like dogs do when they think people have lost their minds. I really want to say you're stupid, but society frowns upon that. My dog pees on people's legs to stop them from conversing, but I don't think I could get away with that. What is a way to get through this?
I think the question is, how do I not let it show on my face that I think people are stupid? And this question makes me laugh a little bit because one of my very best friends, I say that she wears her emotions on her face because you can always tell what she is thinking. If you are not impressing her with your intellect, there is no question. You can tell. And apparently, my sister-in-law actually posted something, I think on Blue Sky, and I have not been on socials at all in a very long time. But I noticed that she tagged me on something on Blue Sky. And apparently my brother had said something to the effect of, I don't understand how you always know when I'm unhappy with something. To which she responded with, have you seen your face? And then tagged me and said, I'm sure you can back me up. And I was like, bro's face has captions. So, there's no question that exactly what he's thinking. So I think first off, there are people who are just like that. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your face or to not do with your face. I will tell my brother what to do with his face. I have a couple of suggestions, but that's a different beast altogether. I can't necessarily tell you how to control your inner monologue because I think your inner monologue is probably great based on what your outer monologue has given us. I will say, however, that if you try to replace the look of pure exasperation with like a look of curiosity, a look of, oh, interesting. Because you are, in fact, curious why they appear so unintelligent. Like, that's not a lie. That's not a false emotion. So if you can work on curiosity rather than judgment, thank you, Ted Lasso. I think it's actually Walt Whitman, but we will quote the more recent prophet, Ted Lasso. I just realized that I need to put Ted Lasso shirts on my list of shirts to make. Go me. Anyway, if you can work on curiosity rather than judgment, because there are things that can make people seem like they are not being smart that are related to other things. There could be language barriers, there could be experience barriers, there could be culture barriers, there could be all sorts of other things. And when you take the time to break down those things, you find out that maybe this person actually is really smart. They just haven't been either exposed to these things or they grew up in a different environment. Our nanny, who is, first off, she's brilliant. Second off, she is one of my favorite people in the world and very, very smart. But she grew up in Venezuela. And there are certain childhood experiences that she did not have. She doesn't have an accent. I think she probably worked pretty hard to get rid of her accent, which was, I don't know that I recommend. But anyway, she doesn't have an accent. But when she says this, she always has an accent. And she says, we didn't do that in my country. And I'm like, okay, it's not like you're coming from like 1947 Russia. Like, this was the late 90s in Venezuela. But all right. But there are some things that she looks at me like I have 15 heads. And it's just because she did not have that experience. So curiosity over judgment is always a good place to start. I am never going to tell you what to do with your face. I'm going to venture that the faces you make are great, and we probably need like a GIF lineup of them so we can use them as reactions. In my experience, people who have caption faces often deserve their own GIF lineup. So there's a suggestion. Maybe you can monetize that. And just know that like sometimes people are going to blow you away with either how out of touch they are or how shockingly unintelligent something sounds. And if you approach it with curiosity, you might find out that you're wrong, which is a good outcome. Or you might find out that you are a much more tolerant person than you thought. Thanks for being here, guys. Have a good day. Love you, mean it.
Do you remember the song Big in Japan from Alphaville?
Yeah.
I feel like it perfectly describes your show. You're number 25 in the health and fitness chart in Japan.
I'm literally big in Japan?
Literally.
I'm literally big in Japan. No, my brother and I have like a long-standing joke about being big in Japan. I'm gonna put that on my resume. I'm big in Japan.